Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris Schaub and I provide listening notes for classic jazz albums. Today we have Ornette Coleman, Something Else, the music of Ornette Coleman. If you like the channel and you enjoy what I'm doing, please subscribe. If you subscribe, YouTube will show the videos to more people and more people will end up listening to jazz, which is my goal for doing this channel. So, Ornette Coleman, Something Else, 1958 on Contemporary Records. Contemporary with acoustic sounds. It's like a collaboration. So it's the acoustic sounds, Bernie Grundman. Highly recommend you get this. It sounds great. I have another copy of it as well. That's original jazz classics. It doesn't sound quite as good. So, and this one comes from an all analog source, which when you're collecting vinyl, you have to have some rules for yourself. And so like my rules are, I try to only buy albums that were recorded analog and mastered all analog, didn't go to digital and then back to vinyl. Because if I'm gonna do that, if I'm gonna listen to digital music on vinyl, I might as well just listen to the streams or buy the CD or SACD. So I try to keep my vinyl buying in check by having some rules. So all analog, really do the research. So there's a link to buy this from Acoustic Sounds in the description, along with, if you're a streamer, links to stream on all the favorite streaming services. Also, it's via Songwhip, so there's a link to Songwhip for this album, as well as some Wikipedia links that describe this album, as well as some of the concepts that are going on that I'm talking about. And all the notes from this talk will be in the description. Okay, so Something Else. 1958, it's Ornette's first record as a leader. It's his debut. Ornette Coleman was born in 1930 in Fort Worth, Texas. Played in Texas, moved around a bit, started playing tenor saxophone when he was 16. And then he played a show, I guess, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and something happened where there was a fight, his horn got destroyed. So he went out and bought a plastic alto saxophone, and you can see pictures of him playing it, and he used that for quite a few years. So he's playing alto saxophone on this record. Notice his alto saxophone, since it's plastic, it has a different tone than a metal saxophone would have. It's a little bit warmer, it's a little less harsh. Not that a saxophone is harsh, but it can have a certain metallic quality to the sound, and his doesn't. His is a little warmer. But showing up on a gig with a plastic saxophone definitely didn't, help his cause sometimes. I think a lot of other musicians were like, what the heck, he's showing up with a plastic saxophone. And then the other thing about Ornette you have to know is this album is pretty inside. This isn't free jazz. Ornette's stretching out on this recording. So he's known as a real innovator. Some people just can't stand his music and other people love it. It's very innovative. He's sort of the guy that he sort of takes the torch from the Charlie Parkers and the Coltranes of the world and then says, okay, no more rules about harmony and following all these kind of strict things for rhythm has to be a particular way, the harmony's got to be a particular way. He wanted to have a concept for his playing and for his improvising he eventually started calling it harmoletics. And harmoletics is, I'll just tell you a quote from him. Harmoletics is the use of physical and the mental of one's own logic made into an expression of sound to bring about the musical sensation of unison executed by a single person or with a group. Okay. Harmony, melody, speed, rhythm, time, and phrases all have equal position in the results that come from placing and spacing of ideas. Basically, what he wants you to do as a player, if you're playing with Ornette, is he wants the musicians to feel free on every time they play a chorus to change the chords. The melody dictates everything. So you can hear him. His concept of melody and tonality is really different than other players of this time. He's very free. He's stretching out quite a bit on this recording. The musicians on the recording, Billy Higgins and Don Cherry, Walter Norris, Don Payne, they are playing more like a traditional bebop, hard bop quintet, backing him up, or quartet backing him up. So you can hear them playing kind of what's familiar. It's very unusual for him to have a piano player in his later recordings, because I'm guessing he felt like, well, if he gets rid of the piano player, then the chords aren't there. So then it even furthers his cause of getting away from chords and traditional harmony and just letting the melody sort of dictate the flow. So this, like I say, this is his first album. He eventually moves to a more free place, and he brings the musicians along. So on this recording, he even says in the liner notes, well, the musicians are not always able to free themselves up from their ideas of how things should be. And he's really trying to get people to be very spontaneous, in the moment, very creative, never play the same thing twice. He definitely has constructed melodies that he's worked out, and the musicians here work out what they're going to do. But in later recordings, you'll hear that he's really pushing to where it's very improvised on the spot. He might have a sketch of an idea or a really formed idea, but what he wants the other players to play is very free. But in this recording, it's not free jazz. I mean, what he's doing, again, is a bit of a stretch from what's going on at the time in 1958. But it's more of like a hard bop, bebop album. But notice his lines when he's playing saxophone. You hear him like leaving lots of space, trailing off. It's unusual the way he plays. His concept of melody and his sense of like where the key center is very different than his contemporaries. And so a lot of what he's playing sounds very unorthodox. You might hate this when you first listen to it. I think with this kind of jazz, and especially when he gets more into his free stuff on later recordings, what you have to do is put aside all of your ideas and just let the music wash over you. Because it's not the kind of music that is going to sound maybe familiar, and you might even be like, oh my God, what is that? Well, let that happen to you. Let it do that to you. Let it take you on a journey. I mean, Ornette's trying to get you to sort of understand what he's feeling in the moment. And so see if you can just sort of let go of all your ideas. He's definitely trying to get the musicians to do that. They don't really totally do that on this recording, but he's trying. And you can hear him, like I say, he's trailing off where he'll play like a line and go, nah. And it'll go like, normally that doesn't happen with players. Like they state the line and they don't just trail off like they're falling asleep and then they come back and play again. And him and Don Cherry are both doing this. And they seem to be kind of in sync conceptually. I should talk about the players. So it's Ornette Coleman, alto saxophone, Don Cherry, trumpet, Walter Norris, piano, Don Payne, double bass, and Billy Higgins, drums. A few other things about Ornette. So this happened for him when he moved at Los Angeles. And I think he got fired from a band, so he was stranded in Los Angeles. So he got a job working at he was an elevator operator for Bullocks department store in Los Angeles. And then he started going to jam sessions, but the way he plays, people were not having it. I mean, they were kind of like, no, that's ridiculous. Stop doing that. Like he was so different than everybody else that a lot of musicians had a hard time playing with him and they wouldn't necessarily invite him up to jam. So it took him a while to make musical friends and people he could play with. But he eventually met Billy Higgins and Don Cherry, Walter Norris, Don Payne, and started putting together like a group. And then they would start playing in jam sessions, etc. He started getting invited into the scene, but there were definitely people who would not hire him. And there are definitely people, there was one quote that he has on the liner notes, which is Nat Hentoff wrote these liner notes. There's a lot of quotes from Ornette Coleman in them. So it's a good read, way more than I can go into, but it's definitely a fun read. He talks about being paid to not play on a gig because the band leader disliked how he played so much. That's pretty funny. So he's working at this department store. He eventually gets fired from the department store because they bring in automated elevators, so they don't need people to run the elevators anymore, which is happening now. AI is going to do that to all of us. But he eventually, someone heard his songs and said he should go talk to Lester Koenig at Contemporary Records, and Lester heard him play like a solo audition and then said, hey, let's do an album. And then he brought together his friends that he'd been playing with, and that's how this album came about. So again, Ornette really would prefer, the quote is from Ornette, he would prefer it if musicians would play my tunes with different changes as they take a new chorus, so that they'd be all the more variety in live performance. And the same is true for rhythm. So he even wanted the drummer, which doesn't happen on this record, but he really wanted the drummer to be very free, rhythmically free, and change it up quite a bit. And that's what you'll start hearing as the sort of free jazz movement starts happening, which Ornette is the creator of this movement, basically. He's the guy who really blew it up. You'll hear that he's trying to free everybody up with his approach. So you hear the beginnings of it on this record. Let's see. So the tracks. Track 1 on side A is called Invisible. It's an up-tempo bebop tune, AABA form, like we've talked about. If AABA doesn't make any sense to you, go back and listen to my first and second videos, because I go over song form and some key concepts. The B section of the tune sounds improvised to me, so it's like he's got a melody for the A section, but he improvises the B section, which you hear him doing this a lot, where it's a distinct section of the song, but he actually improvises that section, and he might play it differently another time. So that's kind of fascinating. It's in the key of D flat, which is also an unusual key, so it kind of sounds strange. It sounds like bebop, but it also sounds different. So right away, your ear will be like, oh, that's kind of unusual. Second tune is The Blessing. It's kind of hard bop. It's a very Ornette kind of a melody. Notice this is the one where you can really hear him stretching out melodically, rhythmically, but the band is very straight. I guess he wrote this in a park in Fort Worth, Texas at 2 a.m. So he was in a park and had his horn or whatever and just decided to write a tune. Probably get arrested today. The next tune on side A is Jane. It's named after Jane Cortez, Ornette's first wife. It's got a Latin A section. It's an ABA C tune, 32-bar tune. Medium swing, kind of hard bop sentiment. Sounds a lot like the rhythm section sometimes on this record sounds like Art Blakey a bit to me. Art Blakey's rhythm section a bit, the Jazz Messengers. But it doesn't, because Ornette's putting his melodic spin on it with Don Cherry. Chippy is the last tune on side A. It's very fast bebop kind of a tune, 32-bar AABA form. The B section sounds kind of improvised to me as well. It's named for a friend and drummer Ed Blackwell's son. Ed Blackwell is a very famous drummer who eventually plays with Ornette quite a bit and is very much part of the whole free movement that takes shape later on. So side B begins with The Disguise. It's hard bop, 13-bar tunes, 13-bar sections, which is unusual. I mean, it's not an even number. It kind of gives it sort of a strange rhythmic feel in terms of like how it resolves, because it's 13 bars. It's also in the key of D, which is kind of a weird key, because I mean the instruments are E flat and B flat. Alto's an E flat instrument. It's a transposing instrument, and trumpet's a B flat instrument. So it's kind of a strange key to play in. So the instruments sound kind of weird playing in D. So listen for that. Next tune on side B is Angel Voice, hard bop, AABA tune, 32 bars. The liner notes say something about it was inspired by, and this is something about Ornette you got to get. He's very high concept, so there's nothing like real random about this, other than he's trying to be very spontaneous. He's got very high concepts for what he's trying to do, and it's very thought out. And he's a very deep guy. And there's some story about a music teacher who had a concept of, angel voices from the heavens, and you could just pull the notes out of the sky, but they were human voiced notes. It's a very heady thing. I didn't quite totally understand it when I read it. Next tune is Alpha. It's 12-bar blues, so kind of familiar. The melody's got this sort of descending four-note feature to it, so I guess he sort of had that idea and then built the tune around that. And then the next tune is When Will the Blues Leave? It's a 12-bar blues. The 7th and 8th bar of the blues are a drum break, a very intentional one. He does it twice. They play the head twice. So that's kind of unique, kind of interesting. And then the last tune, well, actually, before we move on, even though Ornette's very unconventional, I had a friend comment about this, and it reminds me, he always sounds very bluesy. So it's interesting to have this blues kind of a concept that he's almost bringing like jazz back to its blues roots, but with a twist in that his concept of melody over the blues and within the blues is very unique. It's very, very different. It's new. But I think in his mind, he's trying to free up jazz and at the same time bring it back to some of its roots that I think he felt it was lost or was getting stagnant. And then the last tune on the record is The Sphinx. He called it The Sphinx because he thought it sounded kind of like a foreign kind of a melody, and it was long. It sounded long-standing to him, and the Sphinx is a long-standing thing. That's from the liner notes. This was a really weird tune. Notice the sections in the chorus, in the head, when the band does a retard, where it's a retardado is like it's where the music will almost like you'd be conducted, where there'd be da 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 da, where it slows down, okay? And then it comes back in. So I don't know if he conducted it or if it was just rehearsed that way. They're probably all just looking at each other when they recorded it. But there's some really interesting retards that the band does, and it almost sounds like they're stopping and, again, like trailing off. And then they come back in. And then so you've got this really strange, like slowing down feature in the head, and then the tune takes off lightning fast. So it's again an unusual pairing. And you can really hear Ornette stretching, trying to pull the band into this new direction. And they're playing great. They're all killing it. But they are definitely not getting his concept or embracing it as fully as he would like. So something else, Ornette Coleman. Definitely encourage you to get the Acoustic Sounds vinyl if you can find it or stream it. Try to listen intentionally, let the music wash over you. If you enjoyed the video, I try to do 3 of these a week, so please subscribe, it really helps. And have a great day.